Okay, welcome back. Fargo, season 5, the finale, episode 10, titled Bisquik, written by Noah Hawley, directed by Thomas Bazooka. We open with Gator, who's been abandoned by his father, Roy Tillman. Gator manages to find his way to the authorities outside the ranch, and he's going to switch allegiances, giving up information about Roy and about the ranch and what's happening. Meanwhile, Roy is increasingly becoming unhinged. He kills Odin, Karen's father, but Dorothy finds him and shoots him in the stomach. This gunshot sort of sets off the battle between the militia and the authorities that were waiting outside. That allows Roy to escape for a period of time. Wit gives Dorothy some shelter and says he's going to hunt down Roy and take care of him once and for all. As they're making their way through underground tunnels, Roy surprises him and stabs Deputy Farr in the heart, killing him there underground. Thinking he's found a way out, Roy makes his way through the tunnels up to the front of his ranch, only to be greeted by the authorities that Gator led to him, and whereas he knew where he would be. Flash forward 1 year later, Lorraine visits Roy in prison and basically tells him his life is about to become a living hell because she's paid dozens and maybe hundreds of prisoners to torture him, but still keep him alive while he's in prison. And then the finale ends at Wayne and Nadine and Scotty's home, where Ole Munk shows up as they're cooking chili for dinner, saying that a debt still needs to be paid back from what was transpired in the first couple episodes of the season. Dorothy is able to talk him down from that, introducing him to a new way of living, a new worldview, introducing him to a world where you surround yourself with food and people that you love, then you can get rid of maybe decades or centuries of sin and redefine your life. So that's our lesson for the day of what we've learned and how we can turn away from our bad deeds, I guess. So all of those things transpired and maybe sort of in some interesting order and some interesting speed, which we'll talk about. But where you want to start first with that finale?
Yeah, I mean, first, I kind of think with this one, I almost just want to work through it in order. I
Yeah,
think the time
yeah.
jump is kind of odd in a certain way. But yeah, so let's start with the beginning because the first thing that struck me was just how quick it is.
Exactly.
Um, that it's resolved, the
Mhm.
confrontation on the ranch. And Roy slitting Odin's throat, didn't see that coming really. What exactly was going on there? Why was that occurring? You know what I mean? Like part of what I want to talk about with the quickness of it is what happened to all the militia guys.
Yeah. I mean, the authorities seem to have lost no one. They're all there at the end. I guess they're either shot or taken into custody. But it was a battle that didn't last long and didn't have much loss of life, at least on the authority side.
Yeah. I mean, maybe this is the point when it comes down to it that you have these militia guys who talk a big game, and then when it comes down to it, the power of the feds is such that it's just overwhelming, and they don't stand a fighting chance, and they never did, or
Yeah.
something like that. I mean, I guess that's how I read into
Yeah.
the
I mean, I
rest of
guess
the
just
thing.
these weekend militia guys against trained lifetime killers, SWAT team members. It ended up apparently, like another one of these things we didn't really see on screen. Wasn't much of a battle in the end. The one-on-one confrontations were much more interesting and much more informative than what happened in the battle.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of expected a gunfight from the
Yep.
setup last episode. And so, yeah, there's a question there of how I read that and what exactly did happen to the patriots, quote unquote,
Right.
who showed up to the ranch. We saw them there and so on. Maybe there just weren't really all that many of them,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I kind of also found myself thinking if there had been a 35-minute battle, how would I have enjoyed that versus some of the things we got following? I mean, there's sort of this trade-off, I guess, you have to make between what happens here.
yeah, well, it still could have been quick. It could have been like the feds coming in and the guys are like, "Brr," they
Just mow them
and they
down.
just like mow them down and like they're all falling over and then like and then Roy's like, oh no, like it still could have been quick. It was just there was less violence than I thought there would be in the surrounding context, I guess is what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. Well, the idea of, so I guess, after this battle starts, with this idea of Roy, as you mentioned, cuts Odin's throat. I mean, he's just off the reservation, unhinged now, right? Anything that challenges him, disrupts him, steps him off his plan, whether it's Gator or Monk or Dorothy or Odin or anyone, he's flying through them, and no one's going to stop him. As he said in the last episode and said in this episode, this is not part of his journey. This is not a stop at Starbucks. This is the end. So he's committed to getting to the end of this thing, which of course he sort of has to make a 180 on that after he gets shot and tries to sneak out through the tunnels.
Yeah. Um, and then so we have the right. Well, slow down. Dorothy shoots him on the
Yes.
porch in the stomach, and it looks like she's going to shoot him again and kill
Yes.
him. But then, right, like sort of at that moment, Whitfar shows up. The authorities have showed up. Like don't shoot him. We're going to arrest him. But there's a little bit of a through line of a question about the competence of Whitfar or something related to that about the law, I think,
Mm.
is what I started thinking about. Because Roy is able to sneak off the porch. How'd you let that happen exactly? But then in the confrontation between Roy and Wit, um, like clearly Wit could have just shot him, but he doesn't do that.
Yeah. This is a part I had a little bit of trouble with. I mean, I think in that scene we clearly see Wit pull the trigger as Roy is lunging at him with the knife. I mean, they were 18 inches from each other. I don't know how Wit missed in that situation, but he was just I think such a character that was always looking out for what's right, in particular, what he could do to save or help Dorothy, to just be, I don't know, he's not painted as incompetent. He's sort of painted as he couldn't ever do his job as a trooper. He couldn't ever get
Yeah,
anything done.
yeah. I mean, maybe I misspoke a little bit with what I said about competence as the question. I think it is more. I think he does ultimately pull the trigger, but he's too late, and like somehow he's missed him, and you know. But before that, he's got the gun pulled on him.
Exactly.
You know, he's got him dead to rights, and he wants to do what he's supposed to do, which is arrest this guy peacefully, non-violently. I'm pointing a gun at you. Put the knife down. I'm going to call for backup. Um, and what we get, I think it's a certain parallel almost to Danish's mistake in his
Mm-hmm.
estimation of Roy, that Roy is not going to submit to, that kind of legal authority. Um,
Yeah, I think that's pretty consistent. We see, especially in the last third of the season, anyone who thinks Roy will give in or submit to any kind of level of any authority has misjudged him. And how would they have misjudged him after all this time? They've seen who he is, what he does. Um, how could this many people miscalculate what he's going to do?
well, I think part of it is because his whole thing it goes beyond self-interest
Hmm.
at a certain point, right? Like perhaps it would be in his self-interest, or it would have been in his self-interest to not kill Danish, right?
Yeah,
It would have been in his self-interest to instead let Dorothy go, take Danish's offer, proceed to run for re-election and win probably. Now you've got these fake Roy Stillmans out of the way. But when push comes to shove here, with Wit, it would be in his self-interest to just hand himself over and go to prison. He only goes to prison anyway,
yeah, yeah.
right? But that he's just going to fight and kill, and um, there's a hubris to that, or narcissism, or whatever.
Which is interesting, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but it just compares to something he says later on when he's in prison, that prison is the way that things should be.
Yeah, we can
You,
go there, right?
yeah, you fight the weak, you kill your enemies, you take what you want, you just sort of it's sort of basically survival of the fittest. And that's what sort of, I think that's his worldview throughout. And it's interesting to think like he's most comfortable in prison with that worldview. That just seems like who he was those last few episodes.
Yeah, at least that's what he says. And I don't know, he's romanticizing prison.
Yeah,
Um, what about the guards, you know? But then that Lorraine's move is to turn that on him, to say, okay, well, you want it to just all be power relations here in prison.
right.
I'm going to basically bribe a bunch of these guys to turn them against you. Um, have fun.
Yeah. Yeah. We have seen oh boy, Breaking Bad comes to mind. Lots of prisoners can be bought for not much to do a lot of horrific things, and it seems like Lorraine has found the way to do it.
Yeah, which again, then there's the kind of parallel and contrast between Lorraine and Roy running throughout,
Yeah.
where is Lorraine really, morally speaking, a lot better than Roy? I think that's one question we should be asking ourselves here.
Yeah.
She's more civil,
Yeah.
but
Did you find yourself comfortable or satisfied with the fact that Lorraine, quote unquote, won compared to Roy, or were we sort of looking for, I sort of found myself throughout the series looking for both of them to lose in some way. I don't want to say that Lorraine's arc completely got redefined just because she was nice to Dorothy a few times, but are we happy with the fact that Lorraine won between the two of them?
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I certainly wouldn't say that I feel personal satisfaction about that specifically.
Hmm.
I personally feel happy that Dorothy is okay and
Yes.
having biscuits with Wayne and Scotty. I'm on board with that. Um, but that's what's sort of interesting about the dynamic,
Yeah.
that it's not Roy as the bad guy and Lorraine as the good guy, as it
Hmm.
were, as we talked about previously in terms of their politics and social leanings and everything. They're kind of they'd be voting for the same presidential candidate, I think, right?
Absolutely.
Put it that way. But the difference is that Roy's going in this direction of this kind of brutality, and um, Lorraine's in the direction of civility. But she's perfectly happy to, screw people over and take advantage of all of these debtors, right?
Yes.
Um,
That her status and her position next to someone or next to a group of people earns her the right to be able to do whatever she wants, basically.
yeah, I guess there's a big theme about debt. Like
Yes.
that's something of a through line. Roy talks about kidnapping Dorothy as a matter of a debt that needs to be repaid.
Hmm.
Certainly, Munch is tied up in the thought of debt and
Yep.
what is owed. Um, this is where I thought the time jump was a little odd. That's occurring 1 year later.
Yeah.
Okay,
What's he been doing this
what's
whole
it?
time?
He's been to sit in his rocket chair, and he's like, "Well, a man has to, collect the debt."
Yeah.
Um, so that's a little bit odd. But that does seem like it's the thematic through line, something about debt, and then Lorraine, who is, a debt collector, um, and wealthy because of it.
Yeah, and using her position as a way to say that debt is or creates this unpassable chasm between the powerless, those in debt, and those with the power, those that control the debt or who run the debt or who owe or who to whom the debt is owed. And yeah, I was just thinking about the difference between Lorraine and Munch in that sense that they both think very powerfully and very, I think, thoughtfully about what debt is and what it means. I don't get the picture that Lorraine is going to change who she is and her business practices and what her business is going to look like going forward. And that Indira and Nadine are going to be these these wonderful influences on, changing any of that. But it's certainly, I think there's different perspectives as you talk about theme of debt. Roy, Lorraine, Monk, even getting down to Dorothy and Nadine have these different perspectives on what debt is and what a debt should be.
Yeah, right. I mean, the question about the morality of debt also,
Hmm.
you think about it through what Lorraine does, but it's very official. I don't know if people listening have ever gotten in trouble with debt collectors or what have you. Um, Largely, what do? They harass you. They call you on the phone all the time, you know. But it's like largely trying to play on the thought that, hey, this is a debt that you owe with a certain kind of moral force behind it. Legally speaking, often it's a matter of, well, they can wreck your credit and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't tend to go a lot further than that, as I understand it, right? It's like, um, so how do we think about the kind of morality of debt? And I think Monk is a figure in line with that, and the ending moment is through what Dorothy has to say about forgiveness, right? So
Yeah, and Monk is almost the most fundamental base level understanding of debt. There's something that's owed, it must be paid, it must be equal, it must be given. And Dorothy's basically says, why?
yeah,
Why does
exactly.
it have to be that way? It certainly has been that way since literally the beginning of time, but why? If there is other circumstances, if there are things that can move people past that, just why? I think that's her. Monk is kind of thrown for a loop with that question.
Yeah, which is interesting too, because there's a question. There's something very Christian about this, I think, and
Mhm.
there's something like kind of internal to Christianity. Monk does seem to be telling us he is the guy from Wales. I don't know
Yes,
if we believe that or not.
that was my take on it.
Yeah, but the background question, like, so do you buy that there's a character who's 500 years old or whatever? All right, yeah, we can do that, I suppose. But you have that ceremony, regardless of the sin
Mhm.
eating, you know, that's tied up in this sort of logic of the sin as almost a kind of currency, or it's being consumed, or like you're taking on the debt of another, or
Yeah.
something like that. And of course, there's a long history of thoughts about debt in relation to religion and so on and so forth. Um, but there's also the kind of sentiment within Christianity, at least historically, at least think about early Christianity, of forgiveness
Mhm.
and of forgiveness of debts,
Yeah.
precisely, right?
Yes.
Um, and the way that that carried forward historically, for a very long time, um, it was considered a sin to engage in usury, right? Like
Yes.
you were a Christian, you
Yes.
weren't allowed to like lend people money at interest.
That's 100% right. And you just sort of think about the dichotomy of, there is literally sort of this Old Testament view of debt where it was eye for an eye. You take what you are owed. If someone does something to your family, you do it in the same way unto them. And then you move into this again, more Messianic Christianity, which would be the sense of, as you said, the idea of usury was something that said, no, we're not going to do that. And then there's a famous parable from the Gospels of a rich ruler forgiving a man of a very, very, very large debt. And then that man goes to someone else who owes him a very small debt and puts him in prison because he can't pay it and saying,
Mhm.
how can you do this when I forgave you this big debt? This idea of no matter what it is, it's something where you should look beyond the fact of we don't treat each other this way, that we only treat someone a certain way based on what they owe us or what they should be able to do for us. And so, I mean, that just seems like Nadine, Dorothy, is tying all these skewed perspectives of debt and power. She's tying that all into what I'm guessing Noah Hawley and the runners of this show are saying what their perspective is on what this topic is.
Yeah, and I think you're right that her move fundamentally is to say Why? Right? It's like
Yeah.
a debt must be paid.
Mhm.
Why?
Yeah.
Why can't it be forgiven?
Yeah.
Um, and tying that into how Monk is viewing himself, he himself feels, I guess, caught in those structures of debt and obligation. Maybe it's 1 year later because he almost doesn't even really want to collect this debt, that he can't get
Yeah.
over it, you know. A man must, do what a man's supposed to do. And I realized it took me a while to realize he like always talks that way.
Yes.
At
Yeah.
first, I didn't quite realize he always talks that way. It's maybe a little much, but the way she ropes him into helping with the biscuit, and then I think that the closing scene, it really worked for me, at least.
Yeah.
Did it work for you? The very
It,
end.
it did. I did enjoy that scene again, just sort of very um, Christian imagery of the idea of the power of community and food and meeting together at a table, and sort of what that can do and how that can develop and grow relationships and camaraderie. But to your point, I think maybe some of the best moments of this entire season were Wayne's responses to Monk as he's just sort of trying to engage him in conversation, and Monk's facial reactions to Scotty and Dorothy as they are trying to make the food, and he's trying to understand what it is that they're doing. I mean, just unbelievable, intentional, unintentional comedy. It was just, I just, it was falling out of my chair with those parts.
Yeah, absolutely. Like everything just rolls right off of Wayne. He's not concerned. Do you want a soda? It's like,
Yeah.
I saw a tiger once.
Something, yeah.
Um, yeah, I agree. I agree. All of that's great, and I think it does feed into it, because while Dorothy is taking Monk seriously and
Mhm.
talking about why he's there, that mostly, yeah, we're going to go about our business. We're making chili.
Yeah.
She says, so you can either wash your hands and help make biscuits, or we can do this another time, and he's just kind
Yeah.
of, he doesn't get to control the situation. Um, but it's very, I don't know. I'm sorry. I have a thought. I'll get there eventually. You say something.
It's the idea that she can. So what's right is the idea that Dorothy can, in a way, control him, and it's not control. It's not power over him. It's introduce that if it is the case that Monk has been feeling this way, doing these things, living with nothing but sin as a part of who he is for 500 years, that something as simple as let's sit together, let's talk together, let's share a meal, let's do something out of the sort of out of the normal context of who you are can change a person. I mean, like we've talked about how some things in this series are sort of too nail on the head. I don't know if that's what they're necessarily going for, but sort of the sense of um, we can reconcile some things if we'll sit down and share some things with each other, as opposed to I have this power, you have that power. Let's see whose power wins.
Right. No, they treat him with kindness. They treat
Yeah,
him with love. They're sort of welcoming, never being adversarial, even and Dorothy's not being adversarial to him. Um, and this is the point I was trying to work to, if I can figure out how to put it, that ultimately she says, you eat something made with love and forgive,
hmm,
right? And forgive yourself, probably also in there. And he takes a bite of the biscuit and smiles, and that's the end, right? But
yeah,
there's something very sort of light to that, that gets at some notion of, I guess I wanted to say transcendence, but I don't know if I'm making sense to people. Like, what is
yeah.
transcendent about forgiveness is that there's no line of reasons that lead up to it so much as it can just kind of almost magically happen.
Yeah, I think transcendence is a good word. And there's also, in a sense to me, that there is certainly a mountain of gratitude and forgiveness and kindness being shown from Dorothy and her family to Monk. But he takes this thing, he eats it, he consumes it, he changed himself. We can't forget that he had a hand in making that too. You can't just you have to sort of take that step yourself as well. It wasn't just somebody ate something, gave it to me, I can change who I am. No, I have to sort of take a step. I have to do something. I have to be a part of it as well.
Yeah, that's good, right? He helped make the biscuits,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So involved in this community and welcomed
Hmm.
into this, you know. Um, so I thought that worked quite well,
Yeah.
and I didn't really see it coming, but in retrospect, I can kind of see how these themes do tie the season together in a meaningful way, thinking about debt and thinking about forgiveness ultimately.
Yeah, yeah. It's the forgiveness element. I think maybe we should have even expected it when you talk so much about debt and literally a debt collection company and literally debts that must be paid. Were we not always working towards the idea of debt being forgiven?
Yeah, it was right there,
Yeah.
right? Like it was staring us in the face. We're just caught up in, kind of hating Roy Tillman. Of course, I guess we're not forgiving him really
Right.
as Fargo comes to an end here. What about Gator? We
Gator,
forgiving Gator?
I think there are a couple things we have to assume. We have to assume that, we don't ever see, but he did. We were wondering at the end of the last episode, did he lose his eyes? Yes, I think he lost his eyes. We know that he had an about face, gave up his father, gave up some very significant piece of information that helped him in that standoff. He and Dorothy had this moment of reconciliation towards the end, and even asking about his mother. I think that was the moment, even more so than him being tortured or abandoned. I think that was the moment where I felt the most empathy for Gator when, no, actually, I didn't see your mother. You can't go see her yourself. Just that he knows that his life is completely over at that point.
Yeah, but it does seem clear, I guess. Dorothy forgives him. I think
Yes.
she
Yeah.
forgives him. She,
Yeah.
she says she's going to visit him in prison, and does he still like oatmeal raisin cookies?
Right.
Is that? I mean, how come do people? That's your favorite kind of cookie? That
No,
seems
that's
obvious.
that's no one's favorite kind of
No,
cookie.
no one's favorite cookie is oatmeal raisin. But anyway, Gators apparently. So yeah, but I think, and that's interesting. Circling back around on it, I don't know if we have any more thoughts on this, but we're thinking about forgiveness. It does kind of seem like when it comes down to it, the ones who are still outside of that are Roy and I guess also Lorraine,
Yeah. Yeah.
still in the logic of debt, as it were.
Yeah. And how much Lorraine is involved in sort of the collection of things or the punishment of people who don't pay. She has sort of risen to this level, even though she may have had some redeeming moments of doling out the punishment, of actively taking the steps herself to make sure that Roy is going to suffer. So yeah, I don't get the impression that Lorraine is has sort of become a I'm going to go eat chili with him every night of the week, type of mother-in-law. But she has maybe she's even dug herself even more now that she has won and now that she has um, you know, she can she has shown what kind of power she has, what power she's connected to.
Right. And then she's going to make Roy suffer more and exact a payment in Schadenfreude,
Yeah.
right? Which is how that term factors into like Friedrich Nietzsche's genealogy of morals, right? That's how he thinks about it anyway. That
Hmm.
like it is literally a joy you're taking in the suffering of another to pay the debt, And he's like,
Yes.
we need to think about how, as human beings, we actually do potentially enjoy watching other people suffer because we
Yeah.
think they deserve it or what have you. It's kind of like a dark impulse.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I definitely think, in terms of what's going on in this episode, that's pointing in one direction. Everything going on with Bisquick and the biscuits and the closing scene is pointing in the other direction of instead
Yeah, absolutely.
forgiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty good season overall.
Yeah, good season. I was wondering if I should put you on the spot, sort of see where you would put this in the Fargo seasons. We've got a pretty clear for me.
You got a
Second
ranking?
second season is number one. Fourth season is number five. Um, and I think seasons one and five would be vying for the second spot. Then pretty significant gap to get to three, another gap before you get to four.
Yeah, I would think pretty similarly. I would probably put season one above season five. Like 2, 1, 5, 3, 4 or
Yeah,
something.
I bet that's
That's
where I land as well. Yeah,
probably what I would do. I like season one quite a bit, I mean, but
absolutely.
also that was the first experience of they're making a Fargo TV show. Is it going to be any good? Hey, it actually is pretty good.
Oh,
So
and this is not just a word for word or shot for shot remake of the movie. This is just the same style and a different story. So
yeah,
yeah, I
so I think
mean they've
season
done.
one's always going to get a bump for me just for being season one,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah. I think we agree on the power ranking of Fargo seasons.
Cool. Probably everyone else does too. I
Yeah.
don't know. We put it out there in the world. You let us know. Yell at us.
Yeah, let us know. Let us know where
Season
we're
four is the
ranking.
best season. Let us know. Drop us in the comments. All right, well, I think that about does it here. Yeah.
Yeah, we're done with Fargo. I think we're full-time pivoting to True Detective now, right?
Yep. True Detective Night Country. So that premiered a couple of days ago on Sunday. We did a podcast episode on the first episode, the premiere part one, and we'll be back each Sunday night working through True Detective for the next 5 weeks, I guess.
Yep.
So you can look out for our next episode on part two this coming Sunday night. I guess that'd be the 21st, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that. This was a great season. I appreciate being able to talk with you through it.
Yeah, me too. I think talking about how much we like the season, I definitely think I liked it more having these conversations with you, thinking it through, doing the podcast and all of that, than I
Yeah,
would have if I just watched it entirely on my own. So hopefully that goes for people who listen along with us too. Right. I think that's kind of the point of what we're doing here.
definitely, definitely.
Cool. All right. So we'll be back on Sunday night talking about True Detective Night Country Part 2. Thanks for listening. If you're so inclined, please do, leave us a good review wherever you're listening to the podcast. You can check us out on YouTube and subscribe there. Find us on social media, search for TV Obsessive. Go to TVObsessive.com and read articles and so on. We'll have a recap from Felicia Nickens on this episode of Fargo you can read. And Ryan's writing on True Detective Night Country in addition to talking with me on the podcast about it. Um, so see you on Sunday.
But yeah, we'll see you then. Thanks for being Minnesota nice to me throughout this series, and we'll head up to Alaska after this. I guess can't escape the cold.
I don't think that means what you think it means.
Oh, okay.
Minnesota nice, right?
All right. Well, we'll just see. We'll just move up to Alaska, see what we can do for each other.
Yeah. All right. See you in the darkness on Sunday.
All right. See you then.